Hello and welcome to Dynamics Update. This time it's a regular episode. We are talking about the release 10.0.24. And for all of you faithful listeners, you will probably realize that 10.0.24 is already out. But that's mostly because we've had holidays and a bit too much to do at work here in Sweden. So we are a bit late, actually. And with me, as usual, I have Gustav Sundblad. Hello, Gustav.
Hello, Johan. How are you today?
I'm fine. It's a bit late this evening. It's almost not evening anymore. It's night. But I mean, you need to find somewhere to record the podcast. So
yeah, of course, that's how it is.
It's the puzzle you need to figure out.
And not everyone has a full-blown podcast studio, right, Johan?
No, and editors and producers and actually have it as their paid work and so on. But I'm not bitter. No. So let's do this. 10.0.24. So I think I'll start this time actually. With sort of a reflection. It's not really a bullet point, but it's more of a general reflection when I looked at the release notes this time. So we have two main titles in each release note. So there is release notes for commerce, one for finance, and one for supply chain, and one for general things. And there are two general titles in the release notes. Features included in this release and feature enhancements included in this release. So that meaning not new features, but rather things that came before that we have now adjusted, made a bit nicer or fixed in some way. And what I actually realized was that the list of new features are getting shorter and the list of feature enhancements is getting longer. And I don't really know exactly why in this case, but I have two theories. One of them is that most of the backlog is actually getting worked off, so the product is getting more mature, which I think is one of the explanations here. But also that 10.0.25 is actually one of the major releases, so yeah. It might be that they're actually saving some big bang features because they need to fill up the big white paper for the 2021 Wave 2 release, which is coming in a while.
And a good thing is that they get more time to polish the features, right?
Yeah. So I mean I don't have a problem with this because I am of the opinion that if it isn't done, you shouldn't release it because that just makes people annoyed and they are starting to question your quality. So having a feature that is not really done, I think it's better to hold off and put it in the next release and so on. And also I think that the feedback I've been getting from some customers up until now is actually that some of the things have been varying quality in some cases, and I really think it's a really good thing, not just pushing out new features, but actually making the ones that are there better and more reliable, and actually doing like the last percents of the feature. That's good, I think.
Yeah, of course, and also staying up to date, because a lot of these features are of course dynamic in themselves, like finance is being, or like regulatory demands coming in, and retail or commerce, not the least, where you get new customer expectations of having specific functions. So it's really necessary to always improve, and that's the nice thing about the evergreen one version. All of those the segments of actually being able to stay up to date, right? So.
Yes.
With that said, let's just jump into the topics, right? We have, I think we have a number of things either way. I can start with my first one, and I think this is a topic where I can spend. We can do a number of special episodes just on this one. It's inventory counting from POS, or just retail store inventory counting. It's a maybe weird, but it's a favorite topic because I've been involved in so many posts countings from AX 2009, AX4 actually, and up to now. And the feature here, it's actually a feature, but it sounds more like a feature enhancement, but it's listed as a feature as the optimized user experience, improved stock count operations for posts, basically. And I mean, it's an optimized. They've redone it a little bit. It's an optimized user experience for scanning barcodes. That's a sentence which makes it hard to understand. You don't really experience the counting. It's usually combined with a lot of stress for the people who actually do it. But it's easier easier to work with, and that's a very important thing because if you have a complicated way of counting, you increase the risk of people just losing interest or losing focus or doing it wrong, basically. But it's an easier way to add counting lines, and it's a lot of different additions here, and I want to be able to kind of test it in the field as well. But in parallel counting is one where you can actually count the same item in two separate, because it's very normal that you have the same item, like a necklace or whatever. It's on two different locations. It can be a convenience store, so you have two different like floors specifically, but it's the same item. And you can count it in parallel, and back office operations will combine it, and it will adjust accordingly. And it also supports, and one of my key features here is the support of both serial controlled items, like the inventory dimension, as well as the location controlled items, because I've seen this as a demand as well from a number of customers, where because you really divide your store into different areas, you can have a number of different store areas, and you want to be able to count on those, and you do guided counting. Specific retail scenarios, the store is a little ERP or advanced warehouse in itself, so the more functionality you get for this, the better. And of course some review functionality as well, with making sure that you can not post directly. You need to go to the store manager to approve, or you can build your own kind of workflow here. But it's nice to see that it's being improved, because a lot of people do extensions here or improvements to the post operation process, because it's really critical, and it's really critical for the store users as well. So nice feature, or feature enhancement, depends on how you see it.
Yes. All right. So my next one is actually a small warning, because one of the things that happened in this release, and that has happened occasionally, not very often, but it has happened before, is actually that the first release of 10.0.24 was actually a broken package. So the package was not working correctly. There was a configuration which did not work, and which actually made things break. So my point here is actually that when you do the update, you should stay on top of the release notes, and you should stay on top even when you have applied the updates. You should probably keep your ears to the ground and figure out if something has happened, if there is something broken, because I mean it's human error. It can happen, and I would like to push once again for the PEAP Yammer forum, where you actually have great. First of all of the information about the preview releases, and all of the forum groups regarding every single feature and so on. So that in itself is a really, really great place to figure out how things work. And then of course you have also like these kind of errors being reported. So someone will actually tell you that this is not working correctly, and keeping an eye on those forums is a really, really good thing. So I would really recommend it.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Should I continue with my next one?
Absolutely.
I'll do a small one in between here, because another favorite topic of mine is the grid. I just saw that it got another feature enhancement, improved grouping on date and time fields. It's not really a cool feature, but it's a good thing to bring up. I don't know, important to kind of look at when the existing or the old grid will actually be disabled, because I think it's coming. Not sure how soon, or if it is already in place, like a date. But make sure to test if you haven't really enabled or activated the UI, like the new save views and the new grid capabilities. make sure to test that and get it on the way. Also connecting back to our discussion we had before, to kind of make sure that you actually activate features, or at the very least keep track of whenever stuff is being automatically activated, to not break your test flows. It's very important to remember that.
That's good. So my next one is actually one that I thought I understood, because the problem is that I don't work that much with the functional side of the application, but once in a while there is something that actually I think I understand. But in this case, Gustav actually told me that no, you did not understand this at all, at all. And this is enable enhanced asynchronous customer creation. Which, according to the explanation I got, was the fact that you can actually capture more data for the customer in the customer creation process, which will then be synced using the regular retail jobs over to the headquarter module once it's done.
Yeah, and I think you did understand it correctly, because that's exactly what the feature is. It adds more data to be captured when the customer is added. And the whole point of this async, because that's kind of the async concept in .NET and a lot of other stuff, still is like instant, but it's not running as a synchronous, waiting for a response coming back. And it is the same thing here, because what happens is that when the customer is created in POS, instead of doing a real-time service call all the way to HQ or cust table or the number sequence, actually creating the customer ID, it creates the customer in the channel DB with like a GUID value for that customer, and it also tags whatever transaction that customer made at the time, to kind of track the purchase that they made with the same GUID. So you don't get these, like, a lot of unnecessary live calls back end from a performance perspective, which is good. So and then when the job pulls the data up and back into backend to the AX or 365 DB, you have a customer async creation job. It's a regular batch job, basically running, converting all of this and retagging the transaction. What it does is just calls the number sequence for cust ID, creates the cust ID, and replaces or actually populates the customer ID field in the transaction as well as in the new created customer, which is a good thing. So, I mean, it's not, you didn't really understand it incorrectly. It's just that it does not do this live. It's that's, I think, what the misconception is. So you do get this, depending on what you've set up the job with a frequency, you don't actually have a value. You don't have the customer as a customer ID, which is like critical for a lot of other stuff to work with the ERP until those jobs have executed. So it's important to know that when it comes to the async creation. And also, I ran into one case before where it caused a little bit of a headache, because Dynamics was not the master of the customer number sequence. You had a number system being in command of that. So you had to do an extension to actually call the correct number sequence or make sure that they didn't overlap. So keep that in mind when using the async. It's a very good thing to have to reduce performance needs, and but make sure you understand what it does, because it kind of prevents you from getting a customer ID or account num value in the cust table until that process has executed properly.
Yes, so my next one is actually also like a public service announcement, and that has to do with the retail SDK. In 10.0.23 is actually the last version that is using the old retail SDK. And from now on, the recommendation is to be using the new Commerce SDK for deploying and developing the POS client. And I just wanted to mention that there is a date set in October 2022 where the old retail SDK will no longer be supported. And as usually, no longer being supported does not mean that it stops working. It means that it will no longer be supported. So if you have issues with it, you might not get assistant. You might not get help with whatever you're doing. And that is probably not a good scenario to be in. So my recommendation is that you probably start looking at this already now. I mean, I'm not saying that you should phase out the retail SDK right now, but you should probably have a plan for when you're going to do it, especially if like you have like a sprint cycle release schedule. You should probably at least set a date for when this is going to happen.
Yeah, and I think one of the key principles of this shift here is moving to the extensibility framework a little bit more as well for the POS operations, right, or the POS packaging basically, where you get the standard AppX package is well kind of sealed, locked. You don't need to roll that out each time you do an upgrade. You just need to deploy your extensions. So it's if you get this, when you get this in place, it'd be an improvement, I think, but it requires some planning because I think you need to reactivate, etc. So it requires a little bit of a time horizon here. So it's good that you remind Johan, because it's I mean, it does require some reworking of specifically UI components, I think, but plan it ahead because you need some time to do the deployment, I think.
Yes,
in many cases.
Yes, and there is also one more thing that is good to understand here, and that is that the provisioning of the packages of the SDK is actually done in a completely new way. So your developers will start getting used to handling packages using NuGet instead of downloading them manually, unzipping them, pushing them into repository, and checking them in. So what you
actually, which is the normal way of working.
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't going.
We're getting there piece by piece.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say anything, but that's actually how regular developers do things. So what we actually, just to explain it very briefly, what actually happens is that instead of downloading the files and pushing them into the repo, you actually just add links to each of the packages. But that also requires you to think about it in another way, because the problem there is that if you don't, if you do this the good thing is that it's dynamic. So when you do a compile, you actually download the packages into your repository and do the build on the packages, which means that you get the new packages. That might also be a problem, because if you get the new packages and there is something broken in the new packages that you haven't realized, you will get the broken parts as well. I don't think anyone has, at least no one developing things, had missed out on the entire Log4j debacle that transpired over the end of 2021 and the beginning of 2022. And that is basically one of the issues. That when you have these dynamical package libraries, you might end up in a situation like this. But there are ways to handle this. You can actually do something called version pinning, which means that you actually lock the version that you're working with, so you won't get the newer version if you're not prepared to get it. So, but I mean, it's all in all, it's a good thing, because if you have a version that has, for instance, a security issue, then you will get a later and actually fixed version, and that's a good thing. But you also need to figure out that there might be issues.
Yeah, it all goes into a lot of planning, and make sure that you know or read up on the transitioning, of course, and also make sure developers are up to speed. And also, Johan, let's agree, let's not say regular developers, because it sounds derogatory.
No, it's just
ERP and maybe non-ERP developers.
Yeah, sorry, I'm from the other side. So, but
I was just kidding. But it is sometimes playing catch up. It was the same story with TFS when you kind of implemented TFS for AX 2012. .NET had been using it for years, so it's good to gain knowledge. But sometimes .NET developers don't need to see or understand the whole business process, whereas ERP developers do. So it's a good thing. So let's say non-ERP and ERP developers.
But I think it's a good thing that we actually are catching up and learning to use the tools that are there in a very efficient way. Yeah. That's good.
No, I completely agree. I think, and that also makes a lot of sense for the developer, him or herself, of course, because you don't need to learn working in a different IDE developer environment, you can stick to Visual Studio. You just need to, well, stay on the same versions that is supported still, but also like understand the application model and deployment model for Dynamics, which is getting nicer and nicer. So I think it's good.
Yes. All right. So your next.
I have some. Yeah, I have some more. I mean, like you said, it was not a major release in any way, but again, a number of feature enhancements. Another nice one is the asset leasing. I know it's been kind of I brought it up before, but it's nice to see that it's coming more and more features into it. It's a very like niche again. You might not have the need for this, but previously doing like leasing of components was really complicated. You had to use ISVs or employ a lot of staff to do it manually, but there's an asset leasing feature which is easier for you to kind of, because it's a very common nowadays, the subscription model is there, so you can kind of, instead of going full-blown buying third-party ISVs, you can at least look into this if you can use the asset leasing model. And it's coming a lot of like adjustment wizards, making it easier for the reconciliation process and the monthly process of doing asset leasing, buying it, procuring the asset, actually setting the lease period, recognizing the lease payment schedules, amortization, etc. So a number of nice enhancements there to make life easier for finance department, which we all want to do, right?
Yes. Okay. So my next one is actually a finance one. All of the features in finance for this release is actually related to tax in different ways. And one of the cool things I actually thought, because I really like the automation part. I think that it's a good thing to have us humans doing less manual work and have the system actually set up in a way where we can trust that it actually works. So one of the things that I actually saw was that they are using parameter settings for cash discounts and calculations when it comes to tax. And one of the cool things here is that you can actually use multiple different setups within one legal entity. So depending on circumstances, you can actually do your tax calculations in a different way. So in the same legal entity, which I think is a good thing, because that actually means that even though we have different scenarios, we can actually still automate them and don't have to do them manually or like run them through some kind of a workflow or something like that. We can actually do it natively within the system, which is good.
Yeah, it's really cool. Nice. And
I also want to mention that this is also one of the parts that requires the regulatory configuration service, RCS. So when it comes to the tax calculations.
And is that's deployed? That's not something you have to deploy. It's not a scaled unit you have to deploy, right? It's something that comes within.
No, it actually is not. So RCS is mainly the follow up for LCS when it comes to electronic reporting. So that's where you keep all of your electronic reports. Microsoft is deprecating the electronic reporting library, which is in LCS, and are moving to RCS instead. The thing is that RCS is doing other things as well, but it's not something that is set up by default. It's something that you need to set up. It's just like a click, you log in, and then it's done. One thing that actually bit me in this is that if you set it up using your account, then there is no way for anyone else to get into it until you have added someone else. That's the problem. And they can't even remove it. They can't even restart the setup. It's there and it's deployed for the entire organization. And it's one library for the entire organization. So if you haven't fixed the permissions on that library, everyone else is out of luck. I realized this because I was a consultant at customers, and we set this up, or I set it set it up. But then my contract ran out, so I moved to another customers, and I didn't think much more about it. And then someone called me and said, why can't we get into this? Who did this? And I realized, oops. So, but it's an easy fix. You log into it and you set it up. But the good thing is, as well as you do the deploy of the environments using a specific dedicated non-personal account, you should probably do this with the same account.
Makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, good point. I didn't know about that one, actually. It's a very good information. And I have my another favorite topic, scale units, of course. Again, improvements coming to the warehouse execution or the warehouse supply chain management scale unit. It's getting more and more independent, basically. So it's all about scalability. So now in this feature or in this release, some features are generating your own ASNs for outbound shipments, exception handling within the scale unit. So it's basically you're getting an autonomous scale unit here for warehouse execution, where you can basically do all of your necessary work in that scale unit from a performance perspective, which is very nice if you have a global scale where you have multiple warehouses on different regional. So that I think that's it's nice to see that it's getting more and more like it's a mini ERP of its own. Maybe I'm just saying this now. Maybe we'll get our own disconnected WMS, external WMS system. So it's a 3PL solution with a scale unit, basically, with integrations built in. That's more or less what we have if you use the scale unit now. You have an external third party, or non-third party, but an external scale unit working as your WMS, but it's all dynamics. So it's conceptually very cool. And that's it. That's all the stuff I have for this release. There are a number of good minor features and feature enhancements, so read up if you didn't like any one of these.
Yep. So I think the next one will be a big bug one, since we have the major release. So until then, have a nice time, and hear from you then. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.